3,000 alien warships surrounded one dying human outpost. The Grand Fleet commander laughed, called it a mercy killing, and ordered his men to stand down and just watch the fireworks. 22 minutes later, he wasn't laughing anymore. He was screaming into his comms for anyone a euro to tell him what in the galaxy he was looking at. The Kryvax Dominion had conquered 41 star systems without losing a single major battle. 41. Their war doctrine was simple: overwhelming numbers, zero mercy, total compliance. When their scouts first found Earth, they filed it under primitive, low priority. Cute little blue planet, still fighting wars over dirt and flags. Not a threat. That assessment lasted exactly 11 years, because somewhere between primitive and priority, humanity had built something the Dominion never accounted for. A joint task force so brutal, so relentlessly creative in violence, that other species in the galactic community started calling them by a nickname that stuck harder than any official title. Humans called this unit Special Forces. Everyone else, once they saw what these soldiers actually did on a battlefield, just called them death, not as an insult. As a warning, Commander Thessa Vroll of the Dominion's Third Armada didn't believe the rumors. She'd heard the stories passed around officers' mess halls a 6-man human team that wiped out an entire Kryvax garrison using nothing but scrap metal and pure stubbornness. A squad that survived 3 days trapped behind enemy lines with no supplies and came out the other side having somehow captured a command ship. Soldiers' tall tales, she figured. Every species exaggerates their own myths. So when Dominion High Command ordered the annihilation of the human colony world Ashvale a population 800,000, defended by a garrison of barely 600 troops a Thessa expected a formality, a cleanup operation. She positioned 3,000 warships in orbit, more than triple what she needed, purely out of Dominion pride. She wanted this to look decisive on the record. What she didn't know was that Ashvale wasn't just a colony. It was a training and deployment hub for the very unit the galaxy whispered about. And those 600 troops weren't the garrison. They were the welcoming committee. As Thessa's fleet dropped out of warp above the planet, her sensor officer's voice cracked over the comms. "Commander, we're picking up something on the surface. Structures. Big ones. This isn't a colony defense grid. This is a fortress." Thessa leaned forward in her command chair, jaw tight. "Doesn't matter what it is. We outnumber them 1,000 to 1. Down on Ashvale, in a command bunker buried 200 meters under solid rock, a woman named Captain Elena Reyes cracked her knuckles, looked at the tactical display swarming with enemy contacts, and grinned like she'd just been handed the best birthday present of her life. "All right, Deathclaw Squad," she said into her headset. "Y'all wanted a real fight. Looks like Christmas came early." The Dominion opened with a bombardment run a standard procedure, softening the target before ground deployment. 300 warships peeled off from the main formation and unleashed orbital strikes across what their scans identified as military structures. The strikes hit nothing but empty bunkers and holographic decoys. Elena watched the feed from the real command center, buried under a mountain range 40 kilometers from the fake targets, and shook her head. "Rookie mistake. You don't bomb what you can see. You bomb what's hiding." Her second-in-command, a wiry Texan named Marcus Cole, chewed on a toothpick and studied to send ground troops next. "Standard invasion doctrine a soften then swarm. Let 'em come," Elena said. She wasn't wrong. Within the hour, Dominion dropships screamed down through Ashvale's atmosphere, thousands of Kryvax shock troops rappelling into what their scans told them was a lightly defended agricultural zone. Big mistake. The agricultural zone was a kill box designed by military engineers who'd studied 100 years of human warfare from Stalingrad to Fallujah and built something that made every historical meat grinder look like a kiddie pool. The moment Dominion boots hit the dirt, the ground lit up, not with explosions with silence. Kryvax troops walked forward into fog, expecting resistance, and found nothing. No gunfire, no shouting. Just fog rolling across cornfields that weren't cornfields at all. Then the first squad vanished. Not died vanished, communications cutting mid-sentence. Panic started rippling through the Dominion ranks within minutes. Officers screamed orders that made no sense because there was no visible enemy to aim at, and that was exactly the plan. Humans had spent centuries perfecting asymmetric warfare, guerrilla tactics, psychological operations. The Dominion had never fought an enemy that used the terrain itself as a weapon, that treated fear as ammunition, from a ridgeline half a click away. A 23-year-old sniper named Private Jamie Ochoa exhaled slow, steady, and put a round through the visor of a Kryvax platoon leader from 1,200 meters out. One shot. The Dominion troops around him didn't even hear where it came from. "Copy that, Ochoa." Elena's voice crackled over comms, calm as a Sunday morning. "Keep 'em confused, keep 'em scared. Scared enemies make mistakes." Back in orbit, Commander Thessa Vrol stared at a report showing 400 troops missing in action within the first hour and felt something cold settle in her chest for the first time in her career. "Send in the second wave," she ordered, voice tighter than before. "And somebody get me actual eyes on the ground. Now." The second wave came in stronger Euros. 5,000 troops, heavy armor support, air cover. Thessa wasn't taking chances twice. It didn't matter. Deathclaw Squad wasn't fighting a defensive war. They were fighting a war of attrition and terror, and they'd built this entire battlefield to bleed the Dominion dry piece by piece. Marcus Cole led a 12-man team through underground tunnel networks that predated the colony itself, popping up behind armored columns and disabling engines with charges before disappearing back underground like ghosts. "They keep hitting us from directions that don't make sense." A Dominion field officer reported back to the fleet, voice shaking. "It's like fighting shadows." Thessa gripped the arms of her command chair. "They're human, not shadows. Find them and end this." But finding them was the problem. Humanity's Special Forces doctrine wasn't built on brute strength Euros. The galaxy had species stronger, faster, tougher than any human soldier. It was built on something the Dominion had never needed to develop: adaptability. Every human unit deployed with engineers, medics, demolition experts, and snipers cross-trained in each other's specialties, meaning even when squads got separated or lost members, they never lost effectiveness. Alina stood over the tactical table, watching casualty numbers climb on the Dominion side while her own losses stayed in the single digits. She wasn't celebrating. She knew this fight wasn't over Euros. The Dominion had numbers on their side that could eventually grind anyone down if this dragged out too long. "Command, this is Reyes," she said into the fleet-wide channel. Opening a rare direct broadcast to the Dominion forces themselves Euros, something her superiors had authorized specifically for moments like this. "You've lost 40% of your ground force in 6 hours. You still got time to pull back. This offer expires at sundown." On the Dominion flagship, Thessa listened to the translated message and felt her officer's eyes on her, waiting for a reaction. Surrendering to a species they'd called primitive would be a humiliation that echoed through Dominion history for generations. "Belay that message," Thessa said flatly. "Launch everything we have left, all in." Down in the bunker, Elena heard the response: a total escalation, and nodded slowly like she'd expected nothing less. "All right, boys and girls," she said, keying the squad-wide comm, voice steady as bedrock. "They want to go all in, so do we. Time to show them why they started calling us death." What happened over the next 4 hours would end up studied in Dominion military academies for the next century Euros, not as a victory, but as a cautionary tale. Elena deployed every asset Ashvale had, and for the first time, Deathclaw Squad stopped hiding and started hunting. Marcus led armored teams straight into the heart of the Dominion advance, using captured Kryvax vehicles disguised with makeshift human tech to slip behind enemy lines undetected. Jamie Ochoas and the Sniper Corps set up a rotating series of kill zones, moving every 20 minutes to avoid counter-battery fire, picking off officers and heavy weapon operators with brutal precision. But the moment that truly broke the Dominions will happened at the Ashvale River crossing, where 600 Kryvax troops attempted to flank the human position through what should have been an easy river ford. It wasn't easy. It wasn't a ford. It was a trap 18 months in the making. Explosive charges hidden in the riverbed detonated in sequence, collapsing the crossing and trapping half the Dominion force in the open with no cover. Then Deathclaw's heavy weapons teams, positioned on high ground overlooking the entire river valley, opened up with everything they had. Radio chatter from the Dominion side that day, later recovered and translated, painted a picture Thessa would never forget. Soldiers screaming that the humans weren't fighting like soldiers Euros. They were fighting like something out of Dominion nightmares, calm, coordinated, utterly without hesitation, and somehow still finding room for dark jokes over the comms in the middle of the carnage. "Y'all ever notice?" Marcus said over squad comms mid-firefight, voice completely relaxed like he was chatting over a beer. "These guys never learn? Every single time, same mistake. Focus up, Cole." Elena replied, though there was a faint laugh in her voice too. By the time the sun set over Ashvale, exactly as Elena had promised, the Dominion's ground force had been reduced from 8,000 troops to under 600, scattered and demoralized, no longer capable of organized combat. In orbit, Thessa watched the numbers roll in and felt the weight of every one of those losses pressing down on her chest like a dying star. Her aide approached cautiously. "Commander? Orders?" Thessa stared at the planet below. A world she'd expected to burn in an afternoon, still standing, still defiant, its defenders somehow growing more dangerous with every hour that passed. "Pull back the remaining ground forces," she said quietly. "We're not done. But we need a different plan." Retreating wasn't defeat. Thessa knew that. But it felt like it, and that feeling alone told her everything she needed to know about how badly this campaign had gone sideways. Down in Ashvale's command bunker, Elena wasn't celebrating either. She'd lost 11 soldiers that day a euros, 11 names she'd have to write letters home for, 11 families who'd get a folded flag and a story about heroes instead of the people they actually loved. Victory in this line of work never came free, and anyone who told you otherwise had never actually been in the fight. "We hold," she told her exhausted team gathered in the briefing room, faces streaked with dirt and sweat. "They're regrouping in orbit. That means they're planning something bigger. We use this window to resupply, treat the wounded, and get ready for round 2. Marcus leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "Think they'll try an orbital bombardment instead? Skip the ground game entirely?" "Maybe," Elena admitted. "But Dominion doctrine values captured territory over destroyed territory. Pride's gonna keep pushing them toward invasion, not annihilation. That's our advantage. They want to win this the right way, prove a point." That kind of thinking gets people killed. She wasn't wrong. In orbit, Thessa faced immense pressure from Dominion High Command, demanding she either secure Ashvale as ordered or explain to the Grand Council why an entire armada couldn't defeat 600 human defenders. The political weight of retreating entirely, of admitting defeat against a species the Dominion had publicly mocked for years, was unthinkable. So Thessa made her choice. She'd commit her elite shock troops a euros. Dominion special units trained specifically for high-value targets, held in reserve for the most dangerous engagements in Dominion history. If Ashvale's defenders wanted a fight worthy of their reputation, she'd give them one. 2,000 elite Kryvax soldiers, the best the Dominion had, dropped onto Ashvale under cover of an ion storm designed to blind human sensors. It nearly worked. Elena's team caught the first signs of the assault only minutes before elite Dominion forces breached the outer perimeter of the real command bunker a euros. Not the decoy this time. Somehow, through means still debated among Dominion analysts to this day, they'd found the actual location. Alarms blared through the underground facility. Elena grabbed her rifle, checked the chamber, and looked at her exhausted, battle-worn squad. "Well," she said, managing a tired grin despite everything, "guess it's time for the main event." The battle for the command bunker became the stuff of legend within Dominion and human military circles alike a euros. A close-quarters nightmare fought through narrow tunnels and reinforced chambers, where numbers meant less than nerve, and nerve was something Deathclaw Squad had in endless supply. Elena positioned her remaining forces at choke points throughout the bunker's lower levels, funneling the elite Dominion assault team into corridors where their numerical advantage meant nothing. Marcus took point at the first junction, exchanging fire with Kryvax special forces in a firefight so close that muzzle flashes lit both sides' faces. "They're good," Marcus grunted between bursts of gunfire, ducking behind a support column as return fire chewed through the wall beside him. "Better than the regulars. Everybody's good until they meet us." Elena shot back, sliding a fresh magazine home. The fighting raged for nearly 2 hours through the bunker's depths, brutal and desperate on both sides. Dominion elite soldiers proved to be exactly what their reputation promised a euro: fast, disciplined, terrifyingly effective. For the first time in the entire battle, Deathclaw Squad found themselves genuinely on the back foot, giving ground corridor by corridor as casualties mounted. Jamie Ochoa took a plasma round to the shoulder, covering a retreat, and kept firing anyway. Teeth gritted, blood soaking through his uniform. "I'm good. Keep moving. I got this angle." It was Elena who found the turning point, buried in an old maintenance schematic she'd memorized months earlier during bunker construction. A ventilation shaft ran directly above the corridor where the Dominion's main assault force had bottlenecked, trying to force their way toward the command center. Marcus, she said into comms, voice sharp with sudden clarity. Fall back to Junction 7. All squads, converge on my position. I've got an idea, and it's either brilliant or it gets us all killed. It turned out to be brilliant. Alina's team rigged the ventilation system with the last of their explosive charges, timed perfectly with a controlled retreat that pulled the entire Dominion assault force into the single corridor beneath. When the charges detonated, the tunnel collapsed exactly as designed, sealing over 300 elite Kryvax soldiers in a confined space with rapidly vanishing oxygen, and Deathclaw squads remaining heavy weapons trained on every exit point. No further shots were needed. Within 20 minutes, the trapped Dominion force surrendered entirely a Euros, the first mass surrender in Dominion Special Forces history. In orbit, Thessa received the report in silence, staring at numbers that told a story she never imagined writing. Her elite force, the pride of the Dominion military, defeated and captured by a human garrison a fraction of their size. She closed her eyes and made the hardest decision of her career. The formal ceasefire request came through 6 hours later, translated and relayed to Elena's command bunker by a nervous communications officer who still couldn't quite believe what he was reading. Commander Thessa Vrol requested a face-to-face meeting, unarmed, to negotiate terms for the withdrawal of all remaining Dominion forces from Ashvale space. Alina met her in the same fog-covered field where the invasion had begun less than 2 days earlier, now littered with the wreckage of Dominion ambitions. Thessa arrived alone, as promised, and studied the human commander, standing before her a Euro, dirt-streaked, exhausted, utterly unremarkable in appearance for someone who'd just broken the back of an entire armada. I don't understand, Thessa admitted, voice quiet. We outnumbered you 1,000 to 1. Our doctrine, our technology, our training a Euros, all superior on paper. How? Elena considered the question for a long moment before answering, honest in a way that surprised even herself. You fought a war expecting an enemy that follows rules. We never had the luxury of rules. Every human soldier down here grew up knowing that sometimes the biggest, strongest force in the room still loses a Euros, because the ones who want it more, who adapt faster, who refuse to quit even when the math says they should, those are the ones who walk away standing. That's not magic. That's not some destiny thing. That's just what happens when you've spent your whole history learning how to survive against impossible odds. Thessa absorbed this, something shifting behind her eyes a Euros. Not quite respect, but the beginning of it. The galaxy called your kind primitive. Yeah, well, Elena said, allowing herself a small, tired smile, the galaxy's gonna have to update its files. The Dominion withdrawal from Ashvale space was completed within the week, and word of the battle spread through galactic channels faster than any Dominion propaganda could contain it. Other species, other empires who'd feared expanding too close to human territory, took careful note. The stories only grew from there a Euro, some exaggerated, some understated, but the core truth remained unshaken through every retelling. Humanity called their elite warriors special forces, a modest, almost bureaucratic name for soldiers who fought like they had nothing left to lose, because, in truth, they never did. But across 100 worlds in a dozen different languages, the beings who faced them on the battlefield and lived to tell about it all settled on a different word, one that needed no translation, no context, no explanation: death. And on quiet nights in Ashvale, long after the wreckage had been cleared and the fields had grown green again, Elena Reyes would stand on that same ridgeline where the first shot of the battle had been fired, and remember every name, every face, every soldier who'd made sure that word would mean something for generations of humans still to come. Because that's what Special Forces really was. Not a threat, not a boast, a promise.